have the ability to
Three.
record?
Yep, and we're recording. And also for everyone here, we made a WhatsApp group yesterday. So I'm sending the link through the chat, and you guys are more than welcome to join. We'll be posting a Shiur there, as well as if anyone wants to have a discussion on that chat, we will be doing so there as well.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Eitan.
Fantastic. Eitan, thank you so much for all your kind effort on behalf of everybody, me and everybody else. Very much appreciated. I'm enjoying this immensely. Thank you for coming, everybody. Iyov, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. And the truth is people really are going. I mean, I not so many. I haven't really tracked it, but I've gotten a couple people who listened to it on YouTube. So who knows? You all could become famous one day through this, right?
Hopefully.
All right, this is how it goes out. Great. I'll take just a minute for if anybody had a random question.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
We read a paper. We read a paper on Shabbos at the tables. My father brought it, and people were dealing with new ethical issues of the decision of when to open the American economy, because some people, meaning they're trying to. They know that if they open the American economy, many people will die as a result of it. Mostly old people.
And this is a question around the world, certainly.
Yeah. And if they don't, more people's lives will either become drastically negatively affected, who did nothing wrong, because of the economic downfall of, meaning 10 years from now, everyone's going to be in a lot more debt the longer we wait to open it up. So they were meaning just because a younger person did nothing wrong, why should they, on one hand, why do they have to take something away from him by not opening the government just to protect this other person? Meaning, he didn't do anything wrong. Why do they have to take something away from him? But on the other hand, if they do open it up, people will inevitably die.
Right.
What is the?
Look, it's a loaded question. There's a lot of layers. It's probably more than we can really treat adequately in this kind of a context. Hi, Aaron Ekmati. But a couple thoughts. It's not entirely true that this is just an old person's crisis. It's true it's hitting that population particularly hard, but younger people have also died, and it's a risk for everybody. We certainly, if they ask the post-game, which they're not, but if they would ask the post-game, Sakanas Nefashos is huge. That's for sure. But, it's so complex. It's not so clear that the only sakana is the coronavirus. I mean, you sort of alluded to this. Shutting down the economy in such global proportions is unprecedented, and nobody knows what that's going to cause. There was a story of a fellow last week who committed suicide who had a stand in Machane Yehuda, and whatever was going on in his mind, business prospects and such, he just felt that was the end, and shutting down the economy is dangerous with unknown implications. So this is one of those lose-lose prospects that I would imagine if they would hypothetically ask Gedolei Torah, then it would be a Das Torah kind of an issue. How to weigh, and you'd need a lot of clarity, to be able to ascertain this. I don't know if you get this so much. We were just having a discussion in my family. Ezra Schwartz, nice to see you. We were discussing this, to try to calm the public, and I think to give an appearance of control, which I guess if you're a government, you like to sustain that. They will often say, well, now we're flattening the curve, and other kinds of euphemisms, or the number of cases is decreasing relative to the number who are catching it. More are getting better, and other kinds of dynamics. And I think it gives people probably a diluted sense of things are getting better and we're in control, when in fact nobody knows anything. We're really out of control right now, and we're right in the middle of it. And we like to prognosticate. We like to sound more expert than in fact we are. So, it would be wonderful if the Gedolim had some say in this. I'm sure they would have great insights, but nobody's asking them. Meanwhile, we're in the hands of very talented world leaders. I say with tongue firmly planted in cheek.
At the same time, Rabbi, it was one of the big things that was tossed around in America was that, in terms of medical issues, that we follow the doctors, the bakim, and like these in these matters as well. So in a way, don't they have?
Sure, we can, no question. We certainly weigh expert opinions. So yeah. It's great to see you, Yaakov Greenspan, Gilad. Some of my favorite people in the world are all here. As always, it's your call. Most of you are alumni and you're not doing this for credit. Few of you are online for credit, but the requirement, if you're getting credits for this, is to have your volume, have your at least your video on and be participating. But I love to be able to see you. So even though you're all, a lot of you are multitasking, as much as you can be visible and participating, that's great. That adds a lot to the class. Okay. Hi, Gilad. Welcome. Anybody, Gilad, you're just joining for the first time now. If anybody wants to do this, we really are following a sequence. And we're building from beginning, middle to end. And Shmuel, welcome. I would love for everybody to take this seriously and to get the whole series. Yona Greenblatt asked me the other day if I'm open with my notes. Sure, I don't care. If anybody wants it, send me an email. But I think it's better. I think you're better off going in sequence and not cheating and seeing where we're going and seeing all the notes ahead of time. And in which case, if you missed a session, it's all on YouTube. And it's all on Eitan Van's site, and you can catch up. And great. Okay.
At the end of the class, then, would you recommend getting the notes, like once we conclude, whenever that is?
If you want, sure. I add a bunch of stuff to the notes, and of course, the best part is the impromptu, is the extemporaneous insights. That's why your involvement is so critical here. The class is as good as the people who I'm looking at. So, shall we continue? We'll go right into it.
Also, just for those that just joined, before we posted, we made a WhatsApp group, so people can join there. We'll also post the Shiurim there as well at the end of the day.
Great. Okay, so if you could take out, say for Iyov, whichever kind of copy you have. If you don't have a copy in front of you, go to Sefaria or any other such text that you can be able to follow inside. Osios machkimos, don't forget those words. It's the letters that make us wise. They go right into our neshama, and you remember it. If you're just relying on me, you're trusting. I don't know if necessarily your trust is well placed. Maybe I'm making it up, chas v'shalom. But you should see it inside. You'll have insights that we're not even uncovering here. We've seen the very beginning is knockout. It's quite startling in so many details, and we spent some time on that last night as we opened the Sefer. If you missed last night too, you might want to cheat and take a quick scan through the first chapter, the first 12 psukim. But we're holding right now in Pasuk Yud Gimel, and we made the calculated decision, hopefully correct, that we're going to be doing this in English. Occasionally in Hebrew, because you can't substitute for the original. Hi, Shammai. You can't substitute for the original, but for the sake of comprehension, and Iyov is tough to understand, we're going to continue in Hebrew. Pasuk 13, again, the first chapter. And if anybody's not in the frame of mind, or you've had a hard day, so remember, we've met Iyov, and is he ever terrific? I mean, 3 times we get the same whole story about what a guy, and he's wealthy and healthy. He's got everything going for him. And then we saw this very unusual scene with the Kadosh Baruch Hu and the angels and the Satan tagging along, and we'll be talking in depth about the Satan. And the Satan challenges, makes a challenge that you give Iyov everything. What would he be like if you took away some of his comfort, some of his prosperity? And the Shem gives him some carte blanche. He says, go to it. Just don't kill the guy. Pasuk 13. It was on a certain day, as his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their eldest brother. 14. A messenger came to Iyov and said, the oxen were plowing and the she-asses were grazing close by, when Sabians I'm always personally suspicious when they anglicize the translations. Let's see the Hebrew original. In Pasuk Tes Vav, that's Vatipol Shva. Shva is the name, as in, anybody know what Shva is? Biblical Shva? Malkas Shva, think of Sefer Malachim Aleph, the Queen of Sheba. That's identified usually as Ethiopia, not by all Mefarshim. So the Sabians, we might think of them as the Ethiopians, laid siege upon them and took them captive, killed the servants by sword. I alone have escaped, and I have come to tell you. So now you really have to use your visuals. Try as much as you can to paint the scene. Try to be involved here. This is not a class where you can kind of kick back and space in and space out. Really try to build a clear picture in your mind of what goes on. It's all the details will enrich us. Pasuk 16. This one was still speaking. Again, anybody who's missed a beat, the messengers are coming to Iyov and almost breathlessly reporting on the tragedies that are befalling his family as his sons and daughters are eating and drinking wine. And one is telling him of a certain attack by the Sabians, and this one, and I'm going back to 16, this one was still speaking when another one came and said, Hashem's fire fell from heaven, raged among the small stock and the servants, and consumed them. I alone have escaped, and I've come to tell you. Iyov, I don't know if this resonates with anybody, is quite suddenly and spectacularly losing his fortune. The next thing we're going to be learning, they're going to be firing the housemaid. Pasuk 17.
Were his kids tzaddikim too?
Sorry, that was an inside, Barb. It was kids tzaddikim too. It's really mysterious. We're not sure. We saw two possibilities. We suggested two possibilities last night. One is that they may have been wholly innocent, and we don't really see much or know much about them, other than they have a penchant for hanging out at nice meals. Mishte, which looks suspicious, honestly. Mishte is usually a place of hanging out. You guys wouldn't know from such a thing, but you know that some people who go to Eretz Yisrael spend a couple nights on Ben Yehuda Street. So that's my image. I'm sure doing only innocent things, but I'm just like trying to read who's smiling widest out there. I'm not going to incriminate or tell anybody on you though. Okay, so they're at some mishtem. Were the kids meritorious or not? Iyov, we suggested last night, seems to have his doubts. He seems to be highly suspicious about what they're doing, and we wondered if perhaps he's projecting his own inner insecurity and his own inner lack of wholesomeness, perhaps on his own children. Takes one to know one. In any event, Iyov is in rapid succession losing his livestock, which we mentioned also means he's losing his fortune. That's not an easy proposition. I mean, remember what Chazal say, when a wealthy person loses their possessions, it's a trauma. People get used to a certain lifestyle, standard of comfort. We have a famous halacha insofar as it's feasible that if a rich man loses his money, there is an inyan in tzedakah to try to sustain him materially at the level that he's used to. Because to come down from that, anybody remember, a bunch of you took history, anybody remember, for example, what happened to Marta Bas Baitus at the end of the Second Temple period when she suddenly falls from wealth?
Mm-hmm. She died from mud. She's like,
Pig, right? She steps on a...
Right, Gilad, Eitan, you nailed it. Right. In other words, she goes outside, they're starving, her servant keeps failing to bring back anything to sustain them, and she goes outside and steps in animal manure. And the prospect for such a refined woman actually kills her. Can't cope. So losing one's money is not a small proposition. Pasuk 17. This one, that would be the second one, was still speaking when another came and said, the Chaldeans, that would be the Kasdim, who are they?
Where Avram was from.
From Avram, right? Avram's hometown, and those would be the Babylonians. They're the ones responsible for the Churban Bayis Rishon, the destruction of the first temple. So the Chaldeans fielded 3 divisions who deployed themselves against the camels and took them and killed the servants by the sword. I alone have escaped, and I have come to tell you. Any reactions to this? What would you be thinking right now? Nothing?
That's intense.
Yeah, nothing. I would be processing this all
I think
probably.
he would have reacted like, somewhat like more than he has, but
Louder, Aviel, I didn't quite hear.
like I'm like surprised that Iyov has not reacted like more strongly than like what
Right. Today, we're living in times of such, people have a tendency towards self-righteous victimhood. Why me? People often ask, right now they'd be at the bottle and they'd be, chas v'sholem, they'd be cursing Hashem. What are you doing this to me for? I'm an innocent man. It's a concerted, but what seems to be quite striking is the coincidence of it all. Right? What we would call such a thing hashgacha pratis, but boom, boom, boom. And why are they attacking me suddenly with such ferocity? But so far, it's livestock and servants. And 3 parallel reports. He's probably dazed. He's probably in a shock of sorts. 18. Once he, that would be the 3rd reporter, had spoken, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their eldest brothers. When, lo, a mighty wind came from the wilderness. It struck the 4 corners of the house so that it collapsed upon the young men, and they died. I alone have escaped and have come to tell you. Seems to me it's an inadequate translation. It's tough to go from Lashon HaKodesh to a banal language like English, but it says young men, doesn't mention anything about the daughters. Na'arim in Hebrew grammar could certainly include the boys and the girls, and ostensibly does. A couple more psukim if you can take it. This is quite traumatizing unless you've numbed yourself to all bad news given the last few weeks, and so nothing affects you anymore. But if you have a soul and a heart and you care about people, this should be pretty devastating. 20. Iyov arose, tore his shirt, plucked his hair out, threw himself on the ground, and prostrated himself. 21, Chaf Aleph, I'm first doing in Lashon HaKodesh. There is no good translation. Vayomer, Arom Yetzasi mi betin imi, va'arom ashuv shama. Hashem nasan, v'Hashem lakach, yihi shem Hashem mevarach. One of the famous psukim in all Tanakh. He said, I was naked when I came out from my mother's womb, and naked will I return. There, Hashem is given, Hashem is taken away. Blessed be the name of Hashem. Finally, pasuk chaf beis, b'chol lo chata Iyov, v'lo nasan tifla le'elokim. For all that, Iyov did not sin, nor did he ascribe any impropriety to Hashem. Well, if you've never heard this before, your silence, I guess, is one of 2 options. You're either totally spaced out right now, which I never underestimate, or you're just dumbfounded, which is, I think, a reasonable response.
We're finishing notes.
Any initial, before I charge in with my own collection of Mefarshim and my own comments, does anybody want to do something with this or ask questions or convey some problems that you have or anything?
Does anyone mention why Iyov uses the shame, the 4-letter shame instead of Elokim? Because usually we denote din with Elokim, and this seems more like an aspect of din.
Very sharp, Eitan, and absolutely many of them pick up on that. And I think straightforwardly, what would you conclude from that? The fact that Iyov is saying Hashem which is the Midas Arachamim, Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun, and not saying Elokim, which denotes Midas Hadin, that Hashem's divine attribute, which seems fully on display almost in an incomparable way. One doesn't see such Midas Hadin like to this extent in this concentration elsewhere. So what do you make of Iyov's use of Hashem?
Could we say that, yesterday we were talking about, was Iyov righteous, was he not? Could we say that maybe he knew that this wasn't din because he didn't have he did a cheshbon nefesh and just came out to conclude that this wasn't din at all?
I think what you have to do here, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm deliberately speaking a little slowly. I'm trying to enunciate, and I'm trying to speak a little louder. I already speak loud, but I think you have to do the same. The last bit I didn't understand, Eitan, and that was instructions for everybody who participates. Keep in mind, other people want to hear comments too, and make it loud and clear. Go ahead. This is the very end. What are you making of this?
That perhaps Iyov did a cheshbon nefesh, and he determined that this wasn't an act of din at all, and therefore the only other resolve would be for chesed.
Fine, great. I was going to say something a little simpler, and that seems consistent with everything, at least that as appearances go. Iyov takes it like a pro. He is Mekabel Yisurin. If you know, that's one of the 48 paths of wisdom. He accepts suffering, and his relationship with Hashem is not suffered in the least. Remember the last pasuk we just read, which is a wowzer, right? That he doesn't question Hashem. As many today, you can imagine what people would do. They'd be suing Hashem. They'd find some kind of, they take him to the Hague, or some kind of divine court of law. But he is completely accepting, and therefore his relationship is not one defined as Midas Hadin. He just accepts it, and that's the pasuk, by the way. When else do we hear that pasuk? People sometimes people say it when they lose one of their close relatives. I'll tell a story in a few minutes where the pasuk is used with very, very poignant effect, very powerfully. Anything else that you picked up on?
Yeah, I noticed near the beginning it says you.
Your audio is not great, little fuzzy. Be sensitive to that so we can try to hear you. I want to hear everything you're saying.
It says Iyov stood up, he ripped his shirt, and he tore out his hair from his head. Or
right.
That's what it implies. So from what I understand, ripping the shirt is basically his way of signifying the material world being taken away. Ripping the shirt.
And of course, it's one of the sources for our minhag of tearing kriya when we lose one of our closest relatives. That's what we do. We tear our garments. Something has been taken from us, and we manifest that quite physically, quite in a quite a visceral, tactile kind of a way.
Right, and then it says that he tore his hair, which refers to life or himself. I thinking he's referring to his children. So the first saying material, that he's lost material, and then he loses his children.
Right. There is we learn a lot from this practically. Certainly, it's this first chapter at least seems to be a model of how to do it. Excellent. Okay, I have some of my own comments, but if things occur to you as we go, please feel comfortable in participating.
I have something to say.
Yeah, please.
So, this whole thing was because God gave free reign to test whether or not, right?
Yeah.
He would keep it. But God essentially, right, he knows what, the outcome, right? So
right,
taking somebody's kids just for this, to gain this quote-unquote information, even though he already has this information, it seems a little bit extreme.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of you cannot learn Iyov without getting to that question. What's going on here? Right. And then we're not going to answer that right now. The truth is in a little bit, I have some insight. I'm going to cite the Rambam, who has a novel commentary. You'll either take it or leave it. But Rambam has a different take on this altogether. What happens, what I think will partly satisfy Yeshua, but on the surface, the Pashut Pshat of this is very distressing. I mean, we just don't understand. For the untrained eye, it appears, if you remember this is our fourth session. In our first session, we posed part of an overlapping struggle that we deal with in trying to come to grips with how the world works, at least from our finite vantage point, is the seeming randomness of it all. How can we understand something, even if it's, and maybe I'm going to sharpen your question, Shua, even if it's Iyov purely, maybe Iyov did sin, and maybe, but then what does that have to do with the kids? What do they deserve? And if this is a test for Iyov, why are they, as it were, chess pieces that are pawns in the bargain? So many bargaining chips. Yeah. Great question.
Rabbi, just a simple question.
I hope it's okay with you that I'm not immediately going to answer everything. Some of this just needs development, and I know that requires some patience. I think the usual way we do the derech classes is you ask a question, we give you an answer, and instant gratification that requires some consideration, and you have to sleep on this, and we have to kind of process it. And those of you who are coming, who are fortunate enough, and I'm fortunate to have you on a consistent basis, I think a lot of this will start to come together as we go down the line. But keep track of it. Don't lose the question. We're going to come back to it. Aaron, what are you going to say?
Just a simple question. Who are these messengers that came and told them what the?
Yeah, the Greek chorus, unidentified. And when I say the Greek chorus, I think I'm going to come back to something that my perception that I had yesterday when I kept referencing all these movies. There is a distinctly theatrical nature to all that happens. I mean, it's choreographed. One's talking and the other one comes. It's almost calibrated. You understand the opinion that we keep talking about, that all of this is a mashal. It's just it's a fable of sorts. But again, something in us also kind of, something in me, I should say, and a few of the other opinions in the Mefarshim and in the Gemara too, rejects that too, because there's something about the unfolding of events that strikes us as all too real. The world sometimes plays out that way. I mean, you can understand, I've mentioned this before, why I hit upon this particular topic at this particular juncture in history, because of the themes that it's raising. And, our jaws drop open at the events unfolding more rapidly than we have time to catch our breath. And that must have been Iyov's reaction to everything. It's just too spectacular to be true. But, truth is stranger than fiction. So maybe it is all true. And maybe we really are seeing ourselves, as we suggested in the second session, as Rabbi Yochanan himself, we suggested a pshat that, that Iyov lived in Tiberia. Well, that's very hard to reconcile unless Iyov happens to be Rabbi Yochanan himself, unless Iyov happens to be you and me and our own perception of the world. And then, in fact, it goes from being a parable into something of an autobiography of each of us. Okay, a few comments from the Mefarshim. On the famous pasuk that I read in both Hebrew and English, you could look back at it. It's pasuk Chaf Aleph 21. The Vilna Gaon has his typically powerful and incisive comment. He sees Iyov's reaction in superlative, totally positive terms. That's not going to last, but at least for the time being, Iyov is a role model for us. What he understands, the Vilna Gaon understands, that Iyov is saying like this. He's saying, my existence is totally independent of my possessions. As you remember the verse, I came out from the mother's womb naked. I'm going to return naked to the dust. I don't own anything. I'm just passing through. I'm grateful for a little mother's milk, and and a few years later, if you serve me cheesecake for dessert, well, that's just terrific. I don't deserve that either. and I'm going to lose it all one day anyway. So I don't really have any great attachment to my possessions. It's all the more remarkable when you consider the fact that he's a rich man and how unique that is, how rare, what a rare bird that must be to be somebody who's got all that money and not totally infatuated with it, not totally immersed in his possessions. Anybody come to mind in history? Other people who were rolling in money and in valuables, but were not at all attached. I have one
Abraham.
figure that stands out in history.
Abraham.
Rev Papa?
Who do you say, Shmuel?
Maimonides.
He had it, he lost it. Remember his brother died at sea, so I'm not sure he's quite this. He had some money, but then David lost it all, and he was forced to take on the parnasa of both families.
Shlomo Melech says it in Koheles.
Koheles, yeah, I said Koheles.
Shlomo Melech says it in Koheles.
Yeah.
And Shlomo, but Shlomo, who said that? That was Ezra?
No, I said Koheles. Koheles.
Oh, very good.
I don't think it will hurt me. I don't know.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think Shlomo, and what we find in Shlomo, it's funny, I just sat with Simcha Levi Paris over lunch yesterday in Yeshiva, and we were talking about Shlomo. Shlomo actually is the opposite in many ways. He had a lot of money, and in the first stage in his life, when he was still a pristine tzaddik, you're right, he really had no attachment, he was no interest, even when he could have davened for great wealth, and he didn't choose to do so. But the night he married Basparo, it all went bad after that, all went south. And from then, and then Medayik from Psukim, that actually, the money actually started to matter a little too much for Shlomo. And when in the Gemara in Gitzin, we find that, remember the first evil twin imposter story when Ashmedai overtakes his personality? Who can forget such a story? For the many of you who were in my Gemara Shiur, and we all hiked up Motzei Shabbos to Rav and Abaye's grave. So we passed by Yehoyada Benayahu ben Yehoyada's grave, and I told the story of the Gemara in Gitzin. And when Ashmedai takes over Shlomo's personality, and Shlomo's reduced to rags, but he's still got his staff, and he's still got his cloak, meaning he's still very much attached to his possessions. So he would not be an example. Anybody else have an idea? I mean, there may be multiple ideas. I have my own idea.
Well, first of all, that trip was the highlight of the year, by the way.
Okay. Don't say that too loud and clear, because Thursday night, when my car was packed and ready to go this year, the executive decision was made from all of Or Sameach to cancel it. So we didn't get there this year. So, yeah, much to the sadness of my current shiur.
Sorry, guys.
Rabbi, was it David?
Yeah, Ezra, that was your call out to that? You have an insight too.
There's like was it a more Rabbi Eliezer, and he had like so much money, and that he went like walking in the forest, and one of his own servants didn't recognize him.
Excellent.
You know what I'm talking about?
Is it the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai?
I don't know, maybe.
Fine, good, fine. Somebody else had something? All right, this is a digression. We don't want to stay too long on this, but Gilad, you had something?
There was also a nutty that his meister was like 13,000 cows or something, and he said, "I never enjoyed, even my pinky never enjoyed the benefit of this world."
Well, you're combining two figures. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the first example. He gave a lot of meiser, but the one who said I didn't enjoy this world with my pinky was a different figure, and that was the one I was thinking of. So you get the prize tonight. Is Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi.
I knew it.
Right, who is fabulously wealthy. Remember, he inherited. Remember that Antoninus Pius split his wealth with him, the Caesar of Rome, and it was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi who was. He hosted all of his generation's rabbis at his table, and with all of his wealth, he said, "I didn't enjoy it. I didn't even get satisfaction with my little pinky." Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So that's the quality now that the Vilna Gaon is picking up on in Iyov. And it's quite a virtue. I think few of us could admit to not being attached to our possessions. It's what happens when we get into this world. Another way of looking at this too is the famous Gemara in Brachos that's so quotable. When a Rasha, I'm saying it not in the order the Gemara presents it, but I'm doing it intentionally. When a Rasha departs this world, do you remember how the Gemara says how it characterized that? What's the metaphor? It's like pulling thorns from wool.
Or
What
hair out of
image?
milk.
Oh yeah, that's you're stealing my thunder. That's where I'm going, right? But the Russia dyes, and it's like pulling thorns out of wool. They just don't come, right? Because the guy's just so attached. He just can't do without his Starbucks latte, right? So like that's just not going to go. A tzaddik, a pure tzaddik, it's like pulling. And if you've never heard this metaphor before, you'll never forget it. It's like pulling a strand of hair out of milk. There's simply no resistance. It's Moshe Rabbeinu. He dies, or it's anybody who dies by Neshika, by the divine kiss, where his soul simply effortlessly rises out of the body. And it's fine. So that's very much what this pasuk conveys, and it's up there now. Now it's in the pantheon of our great unmaterialistic role models. And Iyov, at least in the beginning, it deserves mention with all these great names.
Well, that's a bit of an oxymoron.
Why do you say?
The pantheon of people that
Oh yeah, I guess so. No,
faithful.
not intended that way. Just a word that came to mind. Good call. Anyway, if you crash your fancy car, you don't care about your car. Of course, what are you doing driving it if you didn't care about it? It's that's an oxymoron. But if you could just walk away and it just doesn't faze you, there's no pain. The more we're involved, overly engrossed in this world, and that's what, if you look around right now and you look at the people who are really suffering, and you feel for people who are suffering. I don't mean to minimize anybody's pain, but the people who are suffering now, in addition to the deaths, but the financial hardship and such, a lot of it comes from this. They're very attached to their things, and you're not going to talk them out of that. That's something that's deeply conditioned. It's hashkafa, and we'll all do better if we can try to wean ourselves of our possessions. Rav Eisenman in the Art Scroll has this to say, and I'm going to quote him because he writes so beautifully. He says, "There's no more sublime acceptance of fate than Iyov's here. Other people numb their senses." How common is that, right? They try to rewrite the past to minimize its merits. Meaning they say, I wasn't so good anyway, to try to kind of like cope. And they live in denial. They rewrite history. Not Iyov. Iyov, with great elegance, he accepts the will of Hashem. And that's, of course, encapsulated in these immortal words. Hashem gives and Hashem takes, and Hashem's name is blessed. The Malbim comments, he says, since Hashem gives through great compassion, so then, of course, it's fine. See, we don't deserve any of this anyway in the first place. We then, if he takes away, we don't have any claims. Who are we? Why do we would deserve to have any claims against Hashem? Gamzu Latova. Quite the contrary. It was nice while it happened. I didn't think I was going to get it. Anybody know one of the words that I can't stand that characterizes our generation that's coming to mind right now? I do like to talk about this a lot. I think it's not talked about enough. Most of us should think about this. The generation is characterized by entitlement, right? And it's got to be on our minds right now. If you're an entitled person, so then you're not reacting as Iyov does. Then that's the guy who has the lawsuit. That's the guy who screams at Hashem and tells him, gives him a piece of his mind. And he goes over to the big rabbis and he says, "Rabbis, you're destroying my life," or finds any scapegoat. I mean, even on some level, and I'm the last person to defend the American president or any of the figures who are ruling the world right now. And with all their potential negligence in this scenario, it's not their fault. I mean, nobody brought the coronavirus. So, okay, so you want to blame them if it makes you feel better. But the attitude of blaming comes from entitlement, comes from the sense that I deserve a different life. This is not what I bargained for. But who are you? Why do we bargain for anything? Why do we get anything? Hashem Nasan, Hashem Lakach, Yeshem Ivarach. It's fine. Kol David Rahmana, Latav Avi, Rabbi Kiva said. Everything that Hashem does is good. It's good. If you have this attitude, you'll be grateful. And if you're grateful, you'll always live with simcha. Grateful people are happy people. If you're ungrateful, if you're entitled, you generally will not find happiness. That's how the Malbim understands. A little bit of a background story. It's off topic, but it's on topic. It's in the Yalkut Shimoni in the 31st chapter on Mishle. Eishes Chayil Miimtza, Bruria. Anybody remember the story? Once you hear it, it's very hard to forget. It's so powerful, so poignant. Remember Bruria and Rebbe Meir? Anybody? Doesn't register with anybody? Eitan, of course. Okay, you got that.
Yeah.
Shua, you know it? No? Okay. Yeah, Aaron, you have this? Okay. So I'll tell it again. If you'll indulge me, it's too good to be true. So they have Buri and Rabbi Meir, whose life is marked by tragedy. You remember Buri's father is Rav Chananya ben Teradion, one of the Asara Harugi Malchus, one of the 10 martyrs, who dies a horrific death. The Osios Porchios Ba'avir, the letters of the Sefer Torah flying in the air as he's consumed by fire alive. Her mother dies, her sister sent to the brothel. What a fate, what a life. They lived in such times of such persecution. Well, they had their own family and they were happy, and they had sons who were Talmidei Chachamim. And one Shabbos, they didn't go to the base medrash on time. And for what the medrash is oblique, so we're not quite sure. Are they blamed? Are they not blamed? But they don't get there and they die for it. I'm not quite sure how we understand that. Ben, welcome. They die at home, and Bruria covers them. And Rabbi Meir, meanwhile, is in the base medrash waiting for his sons to come and learn, and they never show up. So he comes home at one point, and it's time for the third meal, and they eat, and he's asking, where are my sons? And Bruria, according to halacha, technically, she's right, she does not inform him. Shabbos is the time to delight in Hashem's world. It's not a time for sorrow. We learned from the Sefer Hasidim that you're not allowed to read books that'll provoke sadness. Holocaust books that might bring you to tears would not be appropriate on Shabbos Kodesh. Mishnah Berurah brings this down. It's not clear exactly what the dimensions are, because sometimes we read stories in the Torah and the Parsha of the week that are sad too, and that's clearly mutter, in fact, required. But on some level, you're not allowed to be sad, and we don't mourn on Shabbos. We don't mourn on the Yantiv either. There's no avelus if the death took place over Chol HaMoed for the same reason. So she sort of puts him off, and she doesn't give him a straight answer. I'm sure they'll come along soon, she says. It's time for Mariv. It's time for Avdallah. He's asking, no answer. After Shabbos is decisively over, they've made Malav Malka. So Bruria says, Rebbe, I have a shaila to ask. She says to her husband in very respectful terms, and he says, so ask. And she says, if somebody gives me a deposit, somebody's mafki to Pikadon, Yaakov Greenspan and Eitan, we learned this, some Perika mafki together. Somebody's mafki gives me a deposit, and then he wants it back. Am I obligated to return it to him? And Rabbi Meir sort of looked at her. I'm adding a little literary license here, but Bruria was the smartest woman in Shas. One of the smartest people in Shas, and the question's a little bit facile, a little bit oversimplistic here. So not quite sure what she's getting at. And he tells her the halacha is yes, it's not yours. You have to return the object that was deposited. And she said, well, had you not told me so, I'm not sure I'd be able to do so. At which point she takes his hand and wordlessly leads him up to the room where the sons are lying. And he gasps and he tears kriya, much like Iyov. And he says, my sons, my rabbis, my sons in years and my teachers in wisdom. And she said, but Rebbe, don't forget, you told us that if somebody makes a deposit, so we have to return it. And Hashem gave us a beautiful deposit, and we enjoyed it while we could. And then she quotes Iyov, and she says, Hashem nasan, v'Hashem lakach, yishem Hashem mivorach. It's a very high level. It's so easy to talk about in this context, no? Right? When it actually happens, will we handle it as gracefully, as Bruria, as Iyov? Okay, these are models. These are we know this is true in Torah in general. The bar is set high, so we can strive. We can try. The Satan had challenged. He had said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Iyov has everything, and he's going to reject you once you take it away. He says quite explicitly, if you recall from yesterday, Hashem, you'll see, Imlo al panecha yevarcheka. You'll see, if not to your face, he'll curse you. Notice, though, Iyov he employs in the Hebrew Yivarcheka the term, and it's one of the 7 Noachide laws, Birkas Hashem, which is used euphemistically. It actually means the opposite. It's not blessing Hashem, but it's blasphemy. It's cursing Hashem. But it's such a terrible, horrific concept from our perspective that we don't even like to call it what it is. We call it Yivarcheka, as the Satan himself calls it. What's ironic is the Satan was right. Al panecha yivarcheka. But in this instance, Iyov is actually mevarech Hashem. And we do that too. Birkas Hadin is what every Avil says. It says, Baruch Dayan HaEmes, with Shem and Malchus. And that's what we say in acceptance of Hashem's justice. And there's no euphemism. And then the final pasuk in the chapter, B'cholzos lo chata Iyov. If all of this, Iyov did not sin. Wow, is there potential for sin? So from this, the Vilna Gaon says, I mean, what a merit this must be. Not one single thought that was sinful entered Iyov's mind. Okay, now that's a new level altogether. Because, we could do all the above, everything we just discussed, no? But then, maybe you'd have a Havamina, maybe some kind of they might enter our mind. Gewalt, maybe, something. Why me? He says, no. Iyov was, and it's actually true to his descriptor. Do you remember the term that's used to describe Iyov in the very, very beginning of the chapter that fits perfectly here? What's this quality? Yaakov shares it.
Tam. You're like him.
Tam. He's an ish tam. Tzmimus is purity. People confuse tzmimus with naivete, with something with ignorance, but actually it's a stellar quality that we find brilliant people have tzmimus, like Avram, like Yaakov. And so tzmimus is a desirable quality, and it's on full display here in Iyov's example. The Ramban also gives high praise, high marks to Iyov. He says, these are the thoughts of a pure tzaddik, that he vindicates Hashem, and Hasatan must have been confounded at this point. He is not winning the Satan. The fact that it says V'lo nasan tifla lelokim, he doesn't attribute any impropriety to Hashem. Rashi says that he's free of bitterness, he's free of blasphemy. And there are plenty of people in Tanakh and in life and nowadays who are very bitter, who are overflowing with bitterness. What I wanted to conclude with now is a little bit of a discussion of the Satan. As we see, he's going to emerge now in the 2nd chapter as a prime player in a way that he doesn't appear like this anywhere else in Tanakh in such a central role. And so we have a Shabbos to consider this until we resume on Sunday night. And food for thought. I also invite you. I don't know if you've had a chance. Maybe you're all very busy with whatever you're doing, which is understandable. But if you have a chance to do some homework, look into things. I invite you can bring your own sources and your own insights to round out the picture. But a little bit about this Satan figure. Who is he? Okay. Let's conclude with a story about a Satan. And let's go back to somebody we've been talking about too, who's frequently mentioned in the discussion of Iyov, and that was Avram Avinu and Satan's twisted relationship with Avram. It says, before the Akedah, it says, Vayhi acharat dvarim ha'elim. The whole episode of the Akedah Yitzchak begins with these words, and it was after these matters. Velokim nisa es Avraham. See, Iyov is not alone. Hashem, in this case, and here, Eitan, you picked up on it, Elokim, the Midas Adin, the quality of judgment, he tests Avram Avinu. And the question that, of course, confounds the Mefarshim and actually was in the Gemara, after what exactly? After which things? And you can say it was after the episode with Avimelech, but it's a bit of a non sequitur. And so the Gemara goes in a different direction in explaining it. It actually interpolates the following medrash. Achar dvarav shel Satan. After these things, Hashem tried Avram. What on earth would bring Hashem to try Avram? Shua, you were asking about the trial for Iyov, which looks particularly bleak, and why are the children collateral damage? But here he tries Avram Avinu, whose integrity is pristine, unequaled. So now Satan apparently sees an opportunity to criticize Avram, and he asks in a dialogue with Hashem as follows. He says to Hashem, and this should remind us of the beginning of the book of Iyov too. He says, you know, Hashem, this old man, you've given him so much. You've graced him with progeny at the age of 100, and from the entire feast that he made him to celebrate, after the birth of Yitzchak, Satan says, you know, that Avram, did he at least have one stray little bird to offer you? I mean, he just ate everything up for himself. Little humility would be in order, wouldn't it? He's saying that as a criticism of Avram. Hashem, as it were, and I just remind us here, anytime Hashem is presented in personified form, we don't take it literally. It's didactic. It's here to teach us a lesson. We can't be literal. But the Medrash is trying to give over a point. So Hashem responds to the Satan. He said, does he do anything other than for his son? Im ani omerlo, zvaches bincha. If I were to ask him, and this seems to be in the dialogue as it's presented, rendered as purely hypothetical. He said, but Avram is all totally dedicated for me. He said, how dedicated is Hashem, is Avram to Hashem? He says, if I were to ask him, sacrifice your son, miyad zofcho. He'd do it. That's how devoted a servant Avram is. And immediately, Vailokim nisas Avraham. That little episode, in other words, is interpolated right into that pasuk. So we see that Hasatan is working not just on Iyov, he's working on Avram Avinu. And as we suggested already, one of his primary purposes as an angel, as a messenger of Hashem, is to test us. And he tests every last one of us. The virtuous and the less than virtuous, he is there to see what we're really made of. And if we merit, we pass the test and we come out better. We'll see next week. Avram certainly will. Iyov so far is doing just great. But of course, again, if somebody wants to hit the low keys on the piano, we'll see how long that lasts. Any questions? Okay, feel free if you have any. As always, I'm an email guy. So if you have anything you want to write me, be in communication. I hope we can be we can make this much more than just our hour together. And great seeing you all. As we've been doing these last nights, I'm going to stay on. And we'll do, if anybody wants to talk about anything and more random questions. Otherwise, great to see you. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
I have
a couple things. A quick commercial announcement. If you want, on this channel, we started something really beautiful when all my students in yeshiva were quarantined because one of our staff members got the corona, and there was a concern. Baruch Hashem, they didn't get it then either. But they were stuck in the dorms and lonely, so we were learning together a lot on Zoom, but then we made up that on 4 o'clock Friday afternoon Israel time, which is 9 o'clock East Central time, we get together and we catch up a little bit and schmooze, and then I say over a bit on Parsha, and we trade some insights and go into Shabbos with some spirituality. Anybody'd love to join for that? It'd be great to see you.
I was just going to ask about that.
Otherwise, have a great Shabbos. Bye. Anybody else anybody want to talk?
Rabbi, I still have a question. So the pasuk says malach specifically. That umalach bal Iyov. Is there?
Oh, excellent, good call. Yeah. That's one of the disadvantages of translating the whole thing in English. So malach could have two meanings. Share with everybody else who may not know.
So Malach could be messenger, or it could be an angel, right?
Right, excellent, exactly. And sometimes it's both, as in the case where Yaakov sends a malach to Esav at the beginning of Vayishlach. Yeah, very astute. So absolutely, that's very possible, since the whole thing is set up by a Satan. Why not use some angels? For the more dramatic effect, the better. The better to press Iyov's buttons and to get a rise out of him, right?
Right.
That would fit Satan's plan, no?
Right,
No,
but also someone else.
Oh, I just was like, I got the Tanakh actually, so like, cause I found the Iyov in there, and I was like reading it. I don't think I quite got this like when you were explaining it, but like.
Yeah, so go ahead. What was it, Shammai?
Now that I'm reading it, like the Satan, the way he explains it, he was just walking on the earth and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna mess with this guy." Like, is that actually the way it went down? Like, he just said, "Oh, like I'm gonna, he seems like a cool guy to mess around with. Like, why not? I'm bored."
Yeah, but we gave it some context just now, right? Because we said this is what a Satan does. This is what he's hardwired and programmed to do. He went after Avram with the same gusto.
It's like a random.
Oh, this guy's so great. Like okay, let's see how great he is. Yeah. We'll spend some time on this, because one of the big themes that we have to do in more depth is the whole concept of nisayon, of a trial by Satan. Like, what does that mean, and what is it meant to do for a person? So it's actually what we're going to argue, and you could probably figure this out too. As much as it seems like a source of terrible suffering and grief for us in our lives when we have our own tests, it's actually a great chesed. It's a great gift that Hashem gives us by way of the Satan that makes us human and actually helps us become much better in the process. Without tests, we wouldn't become ourselves.
Right.
It was a cakewalk. If everything was just smooth in life, we'd be mediocre at best.
Right, and so the Satan actually here he convinces God to allow him to do this. Like, it's almost like it's like. I don't know. He's like, oh, God trying to defend him. Like, why are you trying to mess with this guy? He's so great, so this, so that. And sometimes like trying to convince him, no, let's mess with him.
Yeah, very astute. Very astute comment. Yeah, good call.
So in regards to the Malach comment earlier, though, one thing I realized is does anyone draw a parallel?
In regards to the
Malach comment.
With regards to the Malbim's comment, yeah.
No, not Malbim. The Malach. My question.
Oh, we were getting to before. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So I realized that there's 4 Malachim here. Does anyone? It reminds me of the instance of Keturah by the or Hagar by the well.
Hagar. Well, Keturah. She becomes Keturah later on.
Right.
Good.
I was wondering if anyone brought. It's interesting because there it seemed like each Malach there were 4 Malachim as well. Each Malach was bringing good news.
Well, actually, in that regard, if they indeed are Malachim, and I think you're onto something by suggesting that, that's actually constant with Malachim. And another familiar episode, of course, is by Avram Avinu at the beginning of Vayira, when they come to him, and each one has its own distinct function. And apparently one of the limitations, as it were, for angels is each one can only do one thing. Raphael goes and cures, and Michael goes and delivers, and like that, so that they're each kind of assigned their own separate task. So you could see that very much consistently here, and it's not a very interesting shot, but it's technically part of the picture. That's what angels do.
All right. Thank you, Rabbi. See you.
Bye, Shammai.
Good Shabbos.
Yeah, same.
Okay. I guess that's it for this year.